Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 417, October the 16th, 2016. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Thanks to everybody who has written in saying how much they enjoyed the live show last week, the live Skeptic Zone Live. Couple of little microphone problems along the way. It's a bit funny when you're doing a live situation like that. There's lots of bases to cover. And the venue, the Occidental Hotel, which is downtown Sydney, was a new venue. The first time the Skeptics have been there, so we had some technical issues to try and iron out. I mean, by and large, it went okay on the night. And, of course, people who were there on the night will realise how much I had to edit out. Lots of little gaps and things going a bit wrong. But we got there. We got there in the end. And thanks to all the people who did turn up. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Sydney Skeptics in the Pub. Coming up on this week's episode, what do we have? We're going to kick off with an interview, a catch-up, a regular spot, I'd have to say, with our friend Michael Marshall from the Good Thinking Society in the UK. Now, right now, as we speak, Michael Marshall and lots of other people, lucky people, are at the QED convention in Manchester, one of the better ones in the world. It's I had the pleasure of speaking there twice. It's fantastic. Good to know that there'll be some Australian representation there. Our reporter, Iran Sagev, who is also, of course, president of Australian Skeptics, will be there. Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki will be there, and I'm sure a smattering of other Australians. Anyway, Michael Marshall, in an interview recorded a few days ago, is going to bring us up to date on the latest homeopathic news. Homeopathic news? It'd be very short news, wouldn't it, if it was true homeopathic news. Coming out of the UK, some good news there coming out of the UK in regards to homeopathy. And, of course, he'll be discussing QED. After that, we're going to read the statement from the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia in regard to the tiny minority of nurses and midwives who are anti-vaccination and have been posting memes on the internet. We covered this story a few weeks ago, and we'll be covering that news in the middle of the show. Then to round off the show, Maynard's spooky action. A couple of weeks ago, Maynard and I and a group of skeptics went to see Ben Goldacre speak here live in Sydney. What an entertaining night that was. And Maynard took the opportunity to interview famed science reporter here in Australia, Robyn Willims, not to be confused with the late American actor. Robyn Willims here in Australia, who is actually a distant cousin of mine somewhere along the way. Robyn Willims has been doing the Science Show here in Australia on ABC Radio for very many years. And then Maynard catches up with Signe Dean, who you would have heard last week on the Skeptic Zone Live. Signe does wonderful work for the broadcaster SBS. Well, that's enough for me at the moment. There's more news to tune into at the end of this episode. But right now I'm going to run downstairs, open the pantry, get the nice grain and seed bread out, toast up a couple of slices of that. And you know what? I'm going to open up a can of tinned spaghetti. And I'm going to have tinned spaghetti on toast like I used to do when I was just a kid. Tinned spaghetti on toast. Why not? While I'm doing that and reminiscing, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Joining me now, as he often does, all the way from Liverpool, it's our old friend from the Good Thinking Society, Michael Marshall. Marsh, hello.
Hi, Richard, and hello to all the Skeptic Zone listeners. It's been months since I've been on the show. I don't know what's been going on. It's terrible.
Yes, this will never do. My alarm went off and it said ring Michael Marshall, so I thought I'd better do it. But no, really, we're going to discuss a few things at the moment, and it's nice to have you as a regular guest on the Skeptic Zone. Let's start straight away with some news coming out of your part of the world concerning homeopathy. What's happening now, Marsh?
Well, there's a few different things, to be honest. So we've had two big sort of victories, two big successes for the Good Thinking Society here in the UK. So one of which was to do with charities that promote homeopathy. And I'm sure you've seen these kind of charities around. But here in the UK, we had several charities that were particularly concerning to us. So people like there's a group called the Maynard Project who promote homeopathy in Botswana specifically to AIDS patients.
Ooh, boy.
Wow. This is the very cutting edge of the what's the harm argument.
Yes.
Is that here is a charity that is promoting a ineffective treatment to people who are clearly incredibly ill. And so this is actually there's been a couple of years worth of campaigning by a chap who's a retired clinical researcher, a clinical scientist called Les Rose, who was looking into these various different homeopathic charities and other charities that promote nonsense and trying to argue to the charities regulator that they should not be considered charities if what they're doing is promoting nonsense. You can't be a health charity if what you're promoting has no health benefits at all. And Les spent a couple of years going back and forth with the Charities Commission, which is the regulator here in the UK, and getting largely nowhere. So he kind of turned to us with Good Thinking to say, what can we do about this? And so first of all, we organised a few health professionals to write to the Charity Commission in an open letter that we published in a national magazine, a national newspaper, saying you need to regulate these health charities that are putting people in harm's way. And nothing happened. And so we put a big expose in another newspaper pointing out all the really crazy, dangerous claims that get made by these charities. And still the Charity Commission refused to act. So then what actually happened was our lawyers took a look at this. We took this to the lawyers that we work with Good Thinking Society occasionally, called Bindman's Public Law Firm, a fantastic law firm who do really great work here in the UK, sort of on making sure that governmental decisions where they're using public funds are made based on good evidence and in the public good. And we effectively threatened to sue the Charity Commission for their failure, their refusal to bring any action against these charities that promote things that don't work, which is certainly an interesting day in Good Thinking headquarters because obviously we're a charity ourselves. So we were effectively threatening to sue our own regulator for failing to do their job. And we set a deadline to say if by Friday, a couple of weeks ago, if by Friday you hadn't commissioned a full review of these charities and looked at their status and looked at what evidence actually allows you to be a charity promoting health, then we'll take you to court over your failure to do your job as a regulator. And when at the start of the week it looked like they weren't budging, we put a big piece in the Daily Mail and had a piece in the print Daily Mail and a piece online saying, the Charity Commission are going to be taken to court by a charity for their failure to do their job. And on Friday of that week, they told us that they were going to have a full review, which is taking place next year, and they're going to go back to their guidelines and look at exactly what constitutes a health charity, what charities are allowed to claim to do in order to be a charity, a health charity. And then they said if as a result of their review of their guidelines, any charities need to be contacted about whether they are able to continue being a charity, they'll take that on from there, which as far as we can see is their way of saying we're going to start looking at our guidelines and make sure it's evidence-based. And if you're not evidence-based, you're not a charity. And that's certainly the way that we're reading the charity law. So effectively, it could mean that once the review takes place in July next year, which is a kind of a reasonable timeline to take on board quite a comprehensive review, it could mean that the charities out there that are promoting homeopathy for all sorts of things and promoting all these other weird and bizarre and quite dangerous treatments for all sorts of things and still being currently allowed to be charities with tax breaks and legitimacy and all that kind of stuff, they're going to get some, hopefully, some letters through the door this time next year explaining why they need to demonstrate that they can prove they can do what they say or they are no longer allowed to be charities. That's what we're thinking will come of this, and it's certainly good that the Charity Commission have committed to doing this review to start that ball rolling. Really,
it really is, and I did enjoy the podcast, The Skeptics with a K, as I normally do enjoy the podcast, Skeptics with a K, where you were discussing this very topic, and it occurred to me then, as it occurred to me now, that it must be somewhat out of the experience of these people to get representation like the ones that you're presenting about these topics. I guess nobody's ever really done it before.
Yeah, as best we can tell, that's the case. I mean, one of the things the Charity Commission said in their response to the various kind of legal correspondence we've had is that they recognise they are not the arbiters of what does and doesn't work. And previously they'd kind of taken an opinion of saying, well, if when you were registered as a charity, if that was good enough to convince the Commission that you had a charitable goal at the time, then it must still be fine. And they even told us that there are almost certainly many charities or some charities that are registered who, if they were to try and register today, would not pass the bar of evidence.
Yes.
Which is our way of saying, well, that just means you've got to go back and look at the people you've registered, because you can't say, as a regulator, we determine who is and isn't a charity, but we're not going to look at the people we've already determined. You can't do that. Your job is to ensure that the people who are claiming to be charities have a charitable benefit. And you can't just say, well, we don't want to go back and look at those things. We don't want to rake over old coals, as it were. So, it's encouraging.
Yeah, well, they might be in for a bit of a shock. Now, here's a question I posed to my listeners a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about homeopathy, and it's one that has crossed my mind from time to time. Now, we talk about homeopathy. Here's some pills. They're homeopathic pills, or take this liquid, it's homeopathic liquid. But if it's indistinguishable from placebo or water or plain water or just a sugar pill, if there's completely no difference, which we suspect is the case with homeopathy, is there such a thing as homeopathy?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. And it's the issue is that then comes down to an advertising claim more than anything else. And so because something is homeopathic if you say it's homeopathic, given that there's no way of proving something is or isn't homeopathic. You say it is. And you would need a regulator who took a very hard-line approach of determining whether something was homeopathic or not. And, of course, the more you look at it, there simply cannot be. And it's why even the $1 million challenge for years has stood up to say, if you can tell one homeopathic remedy from another, that a similarly prepared other, you get the $1 million. And that's kind of the $1 million question that you often put to homeopaths. Because these are just sugar pills, and there was a fantastic case from Nelson's, who are the biggest homeopathic manufacturer in the UK, and they supply Boots, who's our biggest pharmacy. They supply one of the NHS institutions, one of the few NHS institutions that still fund homeopathy, and we'll come to that in a minute. But they are the suppliers to those, and they tried to get a license to supply to the US, so they had to be evaluated by the FDA. And so the FDA had to come in and see how exactly their manufacturing process worked. And you've got these little your vials filled with sugar pills, and they were on the conveyor belt, succussing their way along the line, already shaking, waiting for the first drop of homeopathic liquid to go on. And what the FDA found was when that drop of liquid first falls on the first pill, the little dropper comes down and puts a drop into the vial of homeopathic pills and gives it a shake, and that's how that vial of pills gets potentized and kind of activated. Now, obviously, the amount of liquid in a single drop isn't enough to get to the very bottom pill, the 30th pill in that vial of pills. So the bottom pills have never seen any homeopathic liquid. But the argument that Nelson's essentially put forward was, well, the succussion, the vibration, the shaking of these pills transfers the energy from the top pill, which has seen the liquid, all the way down to the bottom pill, so the bottom pill still has homeopathy on it.
Wow.
But what the FDA found was even more astonishing than that. So if you imagine then that essentially means that the pills at the bottom of that packet have never seen any homeopathic liquid. Those are not homeopathic pills, even by any definition of it. Those are just sugar pills. What the FDA actually found was that because you're having these vials of homeopathic pills shaking their way down the conveyor belt, and the drop comes, and the dropper puts a little pipettes a drop of homeopathic liquid into the vial. On 1 in 6 occasions, because the vial is shaking so vigorously, vigorously, the drop missed and hit the conveyor belt. And the pills shake their way down, having never seen any homeopathy, and apparently nobody noticed. That calls into a hell of a question. And this is the biggest homeopathic manufacturer in the UK. I mean, they make an awful lot of money out of this. They supply boots, they supply parts of the NHS, and they were selling pills, at least during the time that the FDA were investigating. They were selling 1/6 of their pills, having never touched a drop of homeopathic liquid in their lives. It's astonishing. It really is.
When you tell me these things, and I hear it again, and I've heard so many things like this again and again and again, it still floors me. I still find it inconceivable that this sort of thing can still go on in this day and age. And I'm sure the listeners feel the same way. Sometimes you just hear these things and you just can't believe your ears.
Yeah, it's astonishing. I mean, it's hard in a way because I get a real kick out of skeptical investigations, and a lot of people will say to me when you've been around this stuff for a long time and you don't really necessarily always feel like you're getting somewhere, what keeps you going? It's like because sometimes you hear stories like that, and it's amazing. You get these little glimpses of absolute just nuts things happening in a real world. I mean, this is a manufacturing plant that supplies a major national, if not international, pharmacy chain and supplies the National Health Service. And there's something as utterly unbelievable as that happening at the core of it. It's absolutely astonishing. And these little strange stories that keep me motivated. That and the occasional big victory, like we've had with the charities thing and the NHS too.
Well, Marsh, a couple of weeks ago on the program, we had a vet from your part of the world, Danny Chambers, in fact.
Yes, Danny, lovely fella.
Wonderful guy, and he was railing against homeopathy being used for animals, which brings me, as a funny segue, to a posting I saw recently by the Homeopathy Plus people in Australia calling you skeptics dogs. A dog act at Wirral. What's all that about?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not sure whether I've ever been compared to a dog before. I'm not quite sure what kind of dog I would be. Maybe listeners can suggest some. I'm not sure. But yes, no, we've had some fantastic news out of the Wirral. So for listeners on the other side of the world or various other parts of the world, they might not know where the Wirral is. But as I sit here in Liverpool, the Wirral is over the river, where actually Mike Hall, who's the president of the Merseyside Skeptic Society and the presenter of Skeptics with a K, where he lives. And because the NHS in the UK only funds homeopathy it still funds homeopathy, but it's a diminishing number of places. One of the few places that were left that funded homeopathy was the Wirral. Liverpool used to, but Liverpool made a decision in June to stop funding homeopathy as a result of the campaign by the Good Thinking Society that we ran to press them to review and then to get people engaged in that review so that they'd actually hear from skeptics rather than just hearing from homeopathy fans.
Yeah.
And the sort of follow-up to the Liverpool consultation, if you will, was over the water. Their neighbours decided to review whether they'd continue funding homeopathy, and because this consultation has been going on for about maybe a year, nearly something like that in that kind of area. We corralled listeners to our podcasts and skeptics around the country and supporters of good thinking and people who care about evidence-based medicine and how taxpayer money is spent when it comes to healthcare. We corralled them to get involved in this consultation. And what actually happened is the consultation report came out, and it turns out 1,500 people responded to the consultation, which is a huge number. I mean, 700 responded to Liverpool. That was considered very large. We've more than doubled that. And what they found was, of the people in that number who expressed an opinion as to whether homeopathy should or shouldn't be funded, 95% of people who responded said homeopathy should not be funded on the NHS in the Wirral.
Wow.
And only 48 people said it should be. So the numbers were incredibly small. And what was really interesting is 10% of the people who responded were from the Wirral area. And so the homeopaths will obviously say, well, this is 90% of people from outside the Wirral flooding this and changing the way that these decisions are made locally. Yeah, so if you look at the numbers of it, if around about 1,200 people actually answered the question as to whether homeopathy should be funded or not, of the 1,500 who answered the consultation. So they said 10% of people from the Wirral. So that's 120 people from the Wirral answered that question. Now, if we're being generous and saying that every single person who supported homeopathy was from the Wirral, that's still only 48 out of 120 people, which is far fewer than half. So even by if they want to say, well, the outside, people outside of this area have tried to stop us getting access to homeopathy. Well, more than 60% of people from that area, at the lowest number, also said homeopathy shouldn't be funded in this area. So it was a really huge, strong response from skeptics in the area around the country. And as a result of that, last week, NHS Wirral stopped funding homeopathy, which was huge. It was such a great result for us because it means not only is homeopathy done in the northwest, in the Liverpool area, because the Wirral was the last one in the northwest, but actually homeopathy now in England is just consigned to a little bit around the Bristol area and a little bit in the London area. And by a little bit, it's about £3 million-ish in London and about £300,000 in Bristol. But those are the only two cities in England where you can get homeopathy. And then you can also get some homeopathy in Glasgow and a few places around there.
Oh, right.
But we are really starting to push back the tide now. And we are really starting to see real momentum.
Yeah.
In our campaign to see homeopathy ditched from the NHS. And it means this puts a lot of pressure on the Bristol area as to whether they want to continue funding something that pretty much nowhere else in the country will fund. It puts a lot of pressure on London, and it allows us to start looking up to Scotland too and seeing what we can do about asking those areas to start reviewing. Because what we find is when these different health bodies start reviewing homeopathy, they recognize there is no good evidence for this to work. They recognize there is no evidence basis. Previously, I honestly think the reason that they funded it is because they've heard more from people who support it than they've heard from people who support evidence-based medicine. So they found it hard to sort of face down the calls from the patients who truly believe, and they genuinely do believe, that this is the thing that treats them. But what this campaign's allowed us to do is to give an opposition voice. So the doctors aren't just hearing from 40, 50 people who say this is the most important medicine for me, but they're hearing from people on the other side who say you need to spend this money on stuff that works because we don't have an infinite amount of money. This is a very finite pot, and you need to do the best job you can for sick people in your area. And that allows the doctors to make a decision kind of based on their conscience, their medical expertise, based on the evidence basis. And by and large, as best we can tell, there are very, very few doctors who believe homeopathy works because the majority of them have a very, very good medical education. And the two don't necessarily always go in hand. It's very hard to find people who've got a strong medical education who still believe homeopathy works.
Absolutely. And you've just hit the word I was about to say there, education. I think the more people are educated as to what exactly homeopathy is, the more people will disregard it because, a lot of people still think it's some sort of natural medicine and it works on very small doses.
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes back to pretty much the first thing that I ever did as a skeptic, or one of the first things I ever got involved in as a skeptic, which is the 1023 campaign, which was designed to tackle exactly that point, is that the majority of people do not know what homeopathy is. Or maybe these days people do know. Maybe that tide has also turned, and maybe more people know what homeopathy is than they used to. But certainly when I first got involved in skepticism, the majority of people you spoke to would think that homeopathy was herbal medicine or natural medicine. And our big point was the biggest threat to homeopathy is an awareness of homeopathy. The absolute number one threat to a belief in homeopathy is an understanding of homeopathy. And that's all we were trying to spread with 1023 when we ran our series of international homeopathy overdoses to demonstrate that these things are sugar pills. And it's what we've been doing, guiding our work, not only as a volunteer, my work with the Merseyside Skeptic Society, but now for the last 2.5 years, my work with Good Thinking Society as a full-time skeptical activist. That's been a kind of a cornerstone of what we've been trying to do, is to educate the public, to demonstrate what homeopathy is. Because even now, you tell people what homeopathy is, and they look at you like you're making it up. They look at you like you're talking absolute gibberish. But all you need to do is repeat to your average person what a homeopath even would say homeopathy was if they were really pushed on it, and they will recognize that there is absolutely nothing in here to believe or put your faith in.
Well, Marsh, I'm sure you'll be discussing many things, including homeopathy, at the upcoming, very exciting, folks, upcoming QED. And, I wish I was going to be there, but if I was, I think I'd be lost in the crowd.
Yeah, it's going to be huge this year. We've got 600 people are attending, and then once you add in all the kind of speakers and panelists and everything like that, it's going to be a huge number of people. I think possibly the biggest skeptical conference in Europe, if not currently in the world. I'm not quite sure how big other ones are, but certainly it's one of the biggest ones in the world now, which is amazing to think of where we were when we first started this in 2011 as a little idea that we had a couple of hundred people along to of complete amateurs like ourselves putting us on as volunteers. And here we are still volunteers organising the biggest QED we've ever had this year, not only because there's more people there than we've ever had, but this year we normally run a main stage room, and we always run a panel room at the same time, so you get these kind of breakout sessions, so you get a tough choices to which room you'll be in, and it's hard to decide in any given point whether you want to be in this room or the other. And so to make that choice much easier, this year we're running 5 different rooms at once to really give people some tricky choices. It's just going to be a very busy weekend, and we've got people coming from all around the world to join us. So I'm very excited. I'm wildly stressed and mildly terrified, but it wouldn't be organising a conference if you didn't feel all those stresses and strains and things ahead of time. But I'm very, very enthusiastic about it.
Oh, I hear you, Marsh. And folks, we're recording this interview a few days before QED, although it's going out during QED. If you're downloading this and listening to us, QED is sort of on right now. You've got many international guests appearing, including our very own Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki, and that's just fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Karl, we're very excited to have Dr. Karl. He's done some, obviously he's got a fantastic BBC show that goes on, is up all night on the BBC all the time. And that's a great show. And we're looking forward to his talk. And he's doing a panel for us on how to inspire kids to get into science. And he's doing another panel where he'll just answer whatever question our audience throw at him.
He will, yes.
But I think that's the thing about QED, and it was the same when you were there, when you came over for the ones you've been over for, Richard. That people, when they get to QED, they kind of want to be part of it and just do whatever it takes to make QED as good as possible. And I really like that kind of spirit, that ethos of QED, is that we have our speakers and they all just want to sort of pitch in and go, well, I'm here now. What can I do? Where can I go? What can you use me for? And just all kind of join in. And I think it kind of, people seem to really buy into that volunteer, all in it together, all equal kind of spirit, I think. And that's really what QED is all about for us, is that we've got 650 or whatever people there in a room or in a hotel for the weekend, but we are all part of the same thing. We're all part of one big community, and we're all there to kind of join together and support each other and find out how we can do things as well as possible with each other, really.
It is, and I certainly felt the same thing when I did I was very lucky to make 2 appearances at QED 2 years running, and I hope I shall make many more in the years ahead. Folks, QEDcon.org, although it's sort of underway at the moment, but you can still check it out. But never fear, folks in Australia, if you can't make QED. Oh, by the way, our very own Iran Sagev will be at QED too, Marsh, so that'll be something great. And
yes, I'm looking forward to seeing Iran. It's been a couple of years since I saw Iran, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing him again. It's always nice to have some representatives of the Australian contingent.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way, because you'll be here soon enough. In fact, in late November, you will be appearing at the Australian Skeptics convention in Melbourne.
Yes, I can't wait. I've never been to Melbourne before. I was very, very fortunate to be graciously invited. I mean, to the Sydney convention a couple of years ago, and I had a hugely enjoyable time there. And I went off to Brisbane too, and I met some of the Brisbane skeptics, and I really enjoyed it there. So Melbourne's going to be another experience, another city to add to the list. And I've heard only good things about it. And I'm hoping to meet lots of Australian skeptics and enjoy the Australian skeptics kind of community while I'm there, really.
Oh, you will, folks. And don't forget, you can still get your tickets, unlike QED, which is it's all over now. Practically, it's all over. You can still get your tickets for the Australian one, convention.skeptics.com.au, and that's in Melbourne on the 25th to the 27th of November. Sounds good to me. And for those folks in Sydney, Marsh will also be making an appearance here after the convention, but we'll get you more details about that when they come to hand. Well, I better let you get back to it. I'm sure you have more meetings to arrange and things to organise and, I don't know, transport to get people back and forth. It's quite an adventure to organise a convention, having done a couple myself. I can only wish you all the best. But from now, Marsh, how can people get in touch and help you out?
Well, the best thing for people to do would be to go to goodthinkingsociety.org, and you can see all of our work there. But of course, we are a charity, and we are a charity that promotes good evidence-based policy. So hopefully, we won't be gotten rid of by the Charity Commission's review. But as you can imagine, the work we've done with the Charity Commission, the work we've done with NHS Homeopathy, that's taken up quite a lot of time and quite a lot of our space and our resources and stuff like that. So if anybody appreciates the work that we do and thinks it should continue, they can go to goodthinkingsociety.org/donate, and even something like £3 or was that $5 or something, which is the price of a cup of coffee a month, something like that, makes a huge difference. We're such a small charity, and we're hoping that we can continue for years to come. And the more people that support us and say, I believe this work should carry on, the more likelihood we have of existing in sort of 3, 4, 5 years' time to carry on doing work, really. So yeah, goodthinkingssociety.org, really.
And I think for our international listeners, and by that I mean listeners outside the UK, I think your euro or your Australian dollar or your American dollar or your Canadian dollar go a lot further these days. I think the pound's
That's
quite
very
down.
true. Yeah, if there's one thing that Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage have done as a service on, it means anybody outside the UK who wants to fund our work can now do so with their pocket change. You can basically secure my long-term future with the change you got from the bus this morning in this post-Brexit world. So every cloud has if not a silver lining, then a tin lining, I guess.
All right. Well, for now, Marsh, and all the best for QED coming up. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Richard. Always a pleasure to speak to you and to be on the Skeptic Zone.
Richard.
Oh, hi, Trish. Hi. Would you like a coffee?
Yeah, thanks. What are you working on?
I'm trying to come up with a new promo to play on the Skeptic Zone.
Who's it for?
The Good Thinking Society in the UK. You know, Michael Marshall, Simon Singh, Laura Thomas and that crowd.
Oh, yeah, I know them. Oh. They've been doing some great work investigating veterinary homeopathy.
Veterinary homeopathy? What, you sugar pills for cows?
I know, right? And also they're looking at some of the dodgy medical advice given by UK chiropractors.
Really? Okay, look, I'll mention all that in the promo. Now, their website is goodthinkingsociety.org.
And they've recently been reporting on the resurgence of faith healer Peter Popov.
Peter Popov. Great. Okay, look, thanks for that. It gives me something good to think about. Now, once again, we find ourselves visiting the site of Reasonable Hank at reasonablehank.com. The man who's been looking into the online postings of nurses and midwives who should know better because they, some of them, a very tiny minority, of course, are anti-vax, and they're not shy about it. Well, thanks to people like Reasonable Hank, the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia has issued a position statement on anti-vaccine nurses and midwives. As reported at Reasonable Hank, on October the 11th, 2016, the Nurses and Midwifery Board of Australia responded to a number of complaints regarding anti-vaccination material and advice being disseminated by registered nurses, enrolled nurses, and registered midwives by publishing a new position statement on anti-vaccination information. Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia position on nurses, midwives, and vaccination. The NMBA has become aware that there are a small number of registered nurses, enrolled nurses, and midwives who are promoting anti-vaccination statements to parents and to the public via social media, which contradict the best available scientific evidence. The NMBA is taking this opportunity to make its expectations about providing advice on vaccinations clear to registered nurses, enrolled nurses and midwives. The NMBA recognises the Australian National Immunisation Handbook, 10th edition, as providing evidence-based advice to health professionals about the safe and effective use of vaccines and the public health benefits associated with vaccination. The NMBA supports the use of the handbook by registered nurses, enrolled nurses and midwives who are giving vaccines. The handbook is available from the Immunise Australia program website. The NMBA expects all registered nurses, enrolled nurses and midwives to use the best available evidence in making practice decisions. This includes providing information to the public about public health issues. All registered nurses, enrolled nurses and midwives are required to practice in accordance with professional standards set by the NMBA, including the codes of conduct, codes of ethics, and the standards for practice, in particular the social media policy and the guidelines for advertising regulated health services. What should I do if I notice a nurse or midwife is promoting anti-vaccination material? If you have concerns about a nurse or a midwife, you can make a complaint to the AHPRA. The NMBA will consider whether the nurse or midwife has breached their professional obligations and will treat these matters seriously. Any published anti-vaccination material and or advice which is false, misleading or deceptive, which is being distributed by a registered nurse, enrolled nurse or midwife, including via social media, may also contribute to a summary offence under the national law and could result in prosecution by the AHPRA. Pretty strong stuff, I'm sure you'll agree, and we wonder whether this message will sink into the staunch anti-vaccination midwives and nurses out there, who we again stress are a tiny minority. Well done again, Reasonable Hank, for helping to bring this situation to our attention, and I will add a link in this week's show notes. The Skeptic Magazine, the journal from Australian Skeptics. Subscribe online to the world's second oldest skeptical magazine. Visit www.skeptics.com.au and click the publications link. You can also find there over 30 years of back issues free to download. The Skeptic, the magazine from Australian Skeptics.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Yes, tonight it's Dr. Ben Goldacre live on stage here at the Enmore Theatre. He'll be doing all his big hits like, I don't know, lots of things like Don't Trust Big Pharma. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. He'll be doing, I think he does relationship advice as well, and he's got sexual dysfunction. He does it all. He's a doctor after all. I mean, the doctor is in tonight here at the Enmore Theatre. Look, we're out in the foyer. Everyone's talking big pharma. Everyone's talking big drinking. Everyone's talking big red wine. And I'm here with Robyn Williams. How are you, Robyn?
Not very bad. My glass is very small, actually. It's very worrying.
Yeah, look, there's something special about theatre and plastic wine drinking.
Yes, indeed. I blame the government.
I did on the way here. I saved time. How are things at the ABC in the science department?
Shall we say mixed?
Yeah.
The programmes are fantastically well received. My colleagues right across the board, Dr. Carl, of course, Bernie Hobbs, the people from Catalyst, one of whom is next to me right now, Jonathan Newby, and the television stuff, as well as the SBS science programs.
Hey, actually, how would you describe the state of science reporting in Australia at the moment? I mean, when the telly writes something, it's always a bit strange, but is it generally better than it's been? As far as getting things right and not just throwing a big headline like cancer cured.
I don't count the Telegraph in Sydney as a newspaper.
That's true.
It's a loud comic, and some of the things they do are beyond belief. However, the people from Fairfax are good. John Ross from the Australian newspaper is bloody good. And I must say that in the ABC it's quite good, but as a species, well, I know how the dodo felt.
Yes, and is it still normal for people to be the science reporter and the coal reporter or the theatre reviewer? Is it still a specialised beat in this country?
No, it's not quite so much like that, but Jonathan Newby, who's next to me as I speak, as I said, in television, normally you used to have a job was the TV producer. Okay, she does that. And the TV director, she does that as well. And the TV reporter, guess what? And the fourth job she does, she has her own camera. So 4 jobs for the price reduced of 1. That's what we do. I think a 7-day week is a kind of norm.
And are you excited about seeing Ben Goldacre? How much does his Venn diagram and yours mix together as far as what you think about pharmacy and Big Pharma and their tests that they do, and sometimes they fudge stuff?
Well, you know about my declaring an interest, do you?
No. What you're on drugs right now?
Not quite.
Oh. No, I'm afraid I'm not aware of any.
He's my nephew.
Oh, okay. So that means you can heckle him.
I can indeed. In fact, we spent the afternoon together, and in Oxford a couple of weeks ago I was with him at home, and I can claim a certain responsibility for Ben's existence, because I came to Australia when I was 20. I married Pamela, and I then helped introduce Pamela's sister to Michael Goldacre, my oldest friend. Therefore, Ben exists.
So he does owe you one.
He owes me a big one, and he knows it. I keep telling him.
Now, what's the thing we should be wary of when it comes to pharmacy trials that most of us don't understand? I'm sure even you can't understand a few of them when you read them.
I wouldn't even attempt. I leave it to Norman Swan and Ben Goldacre to tell me how it's done. And I think his initiative at the moment, which is to track these drug trials as they're published and to deconstruct them almost immediately online, so that they're publishing online, so that you know immediately whether the drug trial has got holes in it. And that really is going to be like open source stuff. A complete change in the standard, we hope. The book has shown so many of the drug trials were kind of, well, we'll forget the naughty ones that didn't quite work, and we'll celebrate what seems to back us up. I'm not saying they're all like that, but quite a few were.
Yeah, and you only need to get 1 or 2 and everyone's tainted.
It's a problem, yeah.
Look, you have fun in there, and because you know him, you can just talk, you can walk out and drink, go to the toilet, whatever you like. It'll be a very casual evening for you there.
Look, at my level, you send other people to go to the toilet for you.
Oh, that's true. Look, and thank you very much for your time. And look, thank you for all your years on the Science Show. I had the record. Wasn't Fred Dagg on the Science Show back in the day? I
introduced him in 1973 or 4, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that was around about the time I started listening to the show, yeah?
Yeah. Wow. He was a wonderful discovery and is still a mate. And he did a wonderful performance for the 40th anniversary of the Science Show. Absolutely brilliant.
And I'm very glad that the Fraser government didn't scare you off science broadcasting.
Thanks so much. And keep publishing The Skeptic. Wonderful magazine.
And, of course, the host himself, the man who's got it all going on when it comes to good medicine, bad medicine, and even indifferent medicine, it's Richard Saunders.
It's an odd thing to be interviewed on your own podcast.
Oh, yeah, but it saves you holding the microphone and you get to edit it.
Thank you, Maynard.
So when I go, you have to cut that bit out.
I'll cut that bit out. That won't go to air. No.
Now, it's a bit of a big skeptical night tonight. A lot of people are. I wouldn't go as far to say it's a religious experience, but there is a confirmation going on for people to see Ben Goldacre tonight.
There is. Look at this crowd. It's really big, and people are flooding in through the doors at the moment. We're pleased to be here. We've met some good friends just tonight. There's Robyn Williams over there who you were chatting to. A good smattering of people from Australian Skeptics.
The Hoodoo Gurus aren't here.
I thought I saw them out the door.
There's no one from the Dynamic Hypnotics, but apart from that, everyone else.
And Dr. Paul Willis is here.
Yes.
We just have to sort of find him, that's all.
He's in the wine bar next door, going into the bottom fridge.
That's him. No, but it's a great night. It's really great that Think Inc. have brought out Ben Goldacre, and I think he's had a successful tour so far, and this is the grand finale, in fact.
And who's support for him? Howard Jones?
No, Kim Wilde, I think.
UB40? Well, I'll just be interested to see what the support is. It better be good.
It better be good.
Now, you heard Robyn Williams mention science reporting on SBS earlier. Here's one of the people that does it. Hello.
Hi, how are you, Maynard?
Who have we got here again?
Oh, well, my name's Signe Dean, and I'm the editor of SBS Science Online.
Tough gig sometimes, isn't it?
Very tough, because online publishing right now is a very tough business. There's a lot going on.
How would you describe, I asked Robyn earlier, the state of science reporting in Australia? Has it got any better? Is it the same, or are people still getting spelling mistakes?
Well, I think people are getting more spelling mistakes because all the sub-editors have been sacked pretty much. But I think in terms of quality of reporting, it's not that bad. There are plenty of really good science journalists who really care about their craft, and I think they're doing an excellent job. So there's plenty of good writing. Every year you see the UNSW Bragg Science Writing Prize. If we can put a whole anthology together of the best science writing, and that's not even everything that people are writing in the country, I think we're doing all right.
Well, most journalists have got a story in their bottom drawer, and you might not want to give it away, but what's the one science story that you wanted to do or wanted to chase and just haven't been able to because of time restraints, or it's just very difficult?
That's an interesting question. Right now I've been plugged into the very short-term, quick science news turnaround kind of situation. So
that's kind of the low-hanging fruit. And often that can be controversial stuff too. I remember the whole thing about the Vegemite you did. That was very important.
What I really like doing as part of my job, which sometimes takes more time and I'm not always able to do it as much as I would like, more timeless type explainers. So I recently wrote one about why you shouldn't be worried about fluoride in the water. Previously, I've done one on nanoparticles in sunscreens and basically topics like that, which means that you get to do an article that people can return to over and over, and they can share it with their friends when they say something like, oh, I heard that sunscreen's bad for me. And you're like, well, here's an article on SBS Science that shows that maybe it's not that bad.
So do you think Ben is contributing a bit, this Dr. Ben Goldacre, by making people be suspicious of Big Pharma? And a lot of them are already. So, do you think sometimes it's a double-edged sword what he's doing?
Oh, absolutely. But I think what he's doing is incredibly valuable, because you have to be suspicious of Big Pharma. You can't just say that, there's the extreme left and there's the extreme right, and we're all suspicious of different things. And it's important to remember that even if there are some people who are charlatans and who are trying to scam people with their alternative cancer cures, there are also people who do have vested interests in the big business, and they make mistakes as well. So it's extremely important to call them out and to remember that evidence-based medicine can be done well, can be done poorly, and can always be done better. And I think that's what he's doing, and it's really admirable work, and very hard as well.
Oh, and where can we catch your science writing online?
So basically you go to sbs.com.au/science. And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter, just searching for SBS Science.
Okay, well, enjoy your time with Dr. Goldacre tonight.
Thanks, I will. You too.
On Maynard.com.au. Hey, you! And here we are at the foyer at the Totally 80s show here at Enmore. People are going nuts. People are going crazy. Everybody wants to know, how does Lamal get his hair to do that? People behind, how good a time did you have?
Oh, my God, it was friggin' awesome. May I say something?
Yeah.
A man shushed me.
Who shushed you?
A man in the crowd shushed me.
A man in the crowd shushed her. I could never imagine anyone doing that to you. Why would they do that to you? I can't understand that. I'm with Dave Sterry, Real Life. Dave, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. After the Sydney show, I actually just shook for 3 minutes. I just stood there shaking. It was just overwhelming for me as well.
Because I'm introducing every artist on and off, I get to see you all as you're walking off stage. And I think I might have called you back for a bow in Sydney, I think, too, which I think is a nice thing to do, particularly when it's a short set.
I like bowing. It's much easier than singing. I think the horse was famous too. The horse did something.
It won the Melbourne Cup?
Something like that.
On Maynard.com.au. Hey, you!
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast this week. Now, don't forget those people in Australia, particularly if you're in Melbourne, you can still get your tickets for the Australian Skeptics National Convention. For more information, visit convention.skeptics.com.au. And I notice our very accomplished reporter Joe Alabaster is on the bill. So if you're going along to the convention, please say hello to Jo. She's been having a little bit of a sabbatical from the Skeptic Zone lately, which is fine. Everybody needs a break. But it's good to see that Jo will be there speaking to the Skeptics Convention. And that convention, of course, is the 25th to the 27th of November in Melbourne. Yes, convention.skeptics.com.au for more information and to snap up those tickets. And I think you've still got time, if you're in the States, to grab your tickets for SciCon, which is October the 27th to the 30th in Las Vegas. Well, sadly, of course, Tam is no more, but it appears that SciCon will be every bit as good, with lots of speakers you're familiar with, including James the Amazing Randi. For more information, sciconference.org, and we'll link to that in the show notes. But as far as skeptical meetings, it just gets better, because the New Zealand Skeptics are having their conference from the 2nd to the 4th of December in beautiful Queenstown, and I'm lucky enough to be one of the invited speakers. I think we'll have more information about this convention probably on next week's show. I'll see if I can line up an interview with one of the organisers. But for now, if you're in New Zealand, make the effort to come along. Conference.skeptics.nz is the website to look out for. I'll be bringing a bag of tricks, including some divining rods, I think. I'll probably talk about psychics and psychic power and, well, the normal stuff, you know, the sort of stuff I would talk about. And that website, once more, is conference.skeptics.nz. What a busy time for skeptics it is in the latter half of 2016. 2016 has had its ups and downs. Believe me, it really has. But let's see if we can sort of wind it up slowly on a more positive note. Oh, and if you want to have a look at something that we are investigating at the moment, why don't you Google Aquapol, and that's spelled AQUAPOL, and I'll just leave that there. And just before we switch off the microphone, thank you again to those very kind people who contribute to the Skeptic Zone via PayPal or via Patreon, and you can do both of those at skepticzone.tv. Some people chip in $1 a week, some people chip in $5 a week, varying amounts, and every cent helps me produce the Skeptic Zone. And I really appreciate it, and I'm sure all the reporters really appreciate it too, because it's because of people like you that thousands and thousands of other people all around the world continue, hopefully, I certainly hope so, continue to enjoy the Skeptic Zone and get beneficial information. And I do like getting those letters from people, long-distance truck drivers, in the far north of the world, on lonely trips listening to podcasts, including the Skeptic Zone. And if you're in one of those long-distance trucks right now, thank you very much, and I hope that the Skeptic Zone makes your journey a little more enjoyable. And so for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for contacts, an archive of all episodes since 2008, and our online store. Please support the Skeptic Zone by following us on Twitter @Skeptic Zone, liking us on Facebook, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can also show your support by subscribing via PayPal for as little as 99 cents a week. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics Inc. or any other skeptical organisation. It's this amazing disconnect. Edit. Hang on. I've got the cat. Hang on. Wait a second. What is it? No, you can't come in. I'm doing an interview. No, out. You stay there, and I'll feed you in a minute. All right? Go on. That was Henrietta. She sticks her paws under the door. I got a little gap, and suddenly I'm sitting there, and I can see these two white arms, cat arms, coming out of the door. And then I hear meow, meow. Anyway.
Yeah, we get that when we're recording Skeptics with a K. Mike's cat, Withnell, pushes the door open and walks in. And then Mike will shout, "Get out!" And Withnell will walk over to the door and stand right on the door threshold, right on the line, and just stand there and look back at him. And he'll go, "Out," and then she'll walk out the door. But she'll push her look and try, and she knows, but she'll stand right on the line, yeah.
Maybe you should call your podcast Skeptics with a Cat.